All right. Good morning, class.
Morning.
All right. In third grade, we learned about culture. We learned about traditions, languages, and food. We know that North Carolina originally was just land, and people had to come to it for it to become a state. And as they entered our state, they brought some cultural traditions with them, things like festivals and holidays, different foods, different things that we eat now, and ways that we live were introduced by other cultures in the beginning days. Our standard explains how the settlement of people from various cultures affected the development of regions in North Carolina. So we'll discuss in more depth languages, foods, and traditions. We need to understand that North Carolina has three regions. The three regions are the mountains, the Piedmont, which is where we live, and the coastal plains, which is what we call the coast or where our beaches are. Can you tell me if you've ever been to anywhere in the mountains, Anisha or Sage? Where have you been, Sage?
Banner Elk.
Banner Elk. Okay. What about you, Anisha?
Boone.
Okay, and I've been to Cherokee. What are some of the physical characteristics of the mountain region? What are some things that you've seen outside?
Curvy roads.
Oh, absolutely. What about the air? Is the air not thin? Do your ears not pop?
Mm,
How's the weather?
cold.
Oh, very cold, very cold. That's because we're at a higher altitude. Well, what do you know about the Piedmont?
Grassy plains.
Grassy plains. What else?
More farmland.
More farmland? Okay. What about your home? Isn't this where we live?
Yes.
It's in the Piedmont region where most of your large cities are. Like, can you think of a large city?
Charlotte.
Charlotte. Can you think of another one?
Raleigh.
Raleigh. Can you think of another one?
Winston.
Winston. Okay, those are all cities in the Piedmont region, and that's where a lot of our sports and things are hosted in this particular region. Well, what about the coastal plains? You see a lot of what color?
Blue.
Blue. And what does blue normally indicate on a map?
Water.
So it's in this area that we have a lot of cities and counties that are surrounded by water. This is where our beaches are. Have you ever been to a beach on the coast in North Carolina?
Yes.
How many's been to the Outer Banks? No, never been to the Outer Banks? Well, it's an interesting place to go. So these are the three regions that we're going to talk about. Now we need to understand that there were people from all over the world that migrated to these places around the late 1700s, 1787 to be exact. We're going to talk about the different cultural contributions. That means what things that they introduced to these areas that are still in place today. We're going to talk about each region in depth and in more detail. But I wanted you to get a graphic or a visual of what our state looks like and how it's divided among the three regions. So we're going to take a look at a PowerPoint. Are there any questions at this point? Thumbs up if you're with me. All right. The big idea is how have different cultural groups affected the lives of all North Carolinians? Can you tell me what a North Carolinian is?
A person that lives in North Carolina.
Absolutely, Anisha, very good. It's someone who resides here. All right. Before we begin, I'd like to continue with our prior knowledge. Understand that cooking, music, storytelling, art, and festivals are all aspects of traditions. These are things that were introduced by new cultures to our state, and a lot of these cultural traditions still remain in place today. You need to understand that the cultural traditions that make up a certain region really make up the identity of that region. That means what that region is known for. Okay, we know the mountains, or we acknowledge the mountains for cold weather. They're at a higher altitude. It's where a lot of bad weather takes place. We acknowledge the Piedmont region because of the larger cities. That's where we tend to dine more. That's where our sports are. And we acknowledge the coastal plains normally for vacationing because that's where our beaches are. Another aspect of traditions are our holidays. Guys, can you think of any holidays that we celebrate?
Christmas.
Christmas is a holiday. Can you think of another one?
Easter.
Easter. All right, you need to understand that these holidays that we honor today as North Carolinians were introduced by other cultures. Here are some examples of some holidays that we celebrate to honor our state. On April 12th, we celebrate Halifax Resolves. On May 20th, we celebrate Mecklenburg Declaration Day. Pay close attention to Mecklenburg Declaration Day because later in this lesson, not in today's lesson, but later in one of the learning segments, we will discuss the Mecklenburg Declaration of Independence in more depth, and we'll compare it to the United States Declaration of Independence. Here's a table that kind of lists some of the holidays that we celebrate here, not just in North Carolina, but in the United States. Memorial Day, we celebrate the last Monday in May. Labor Day, we celebrate the first Monday in September. And of course, Thanksgiving is always the fourth Thursday in what month?
November.
Absolutely, absolutely. We also have a state fair, and you need to understand that this state fair is not synonymous to the one you're used to going to. It didn't begin with all these rides and things like that. It was a way to honor agriculture. And in later segments, we'll explore the different business aspects of North Carolina and the various commodities that culture has introduced to our state that impacted our economy. But the first fair was held in 1853. It was designed for farmers to showcase their livestock and their harvest and any kind of agricultural machinery around the time of the Industrial Revolution. When it first began, about 5,000 people came. Now today, about 800,000 people attend the fair. Understand that agriculture was the basis for creating a fair like that. Agriculture is one of the main economical benefits to North Carolina. Celebrations are also a form of traditions. We call them festivals, and they normally happen annually. Festivals tend to show us how important a place is. They also tell us a lot about who lives there. In the Piedmont region, larger cities such as Raleigh, Charlotte, and Asheville celebrate New Year's Eve with first night. Have any of you ever been to first night? Okay, and it's just a night of celebration to honor the year that's passing and to introduce or bring in the year that's coming. Here's some more information about festivals. Festivals are just special days that people celebrate local history and traditions. Festivals can also honor people and businesses. Some local events are also aimed at helping the community. So when certain communities host festivals, sometimes it's for fundraisers. It's to raise money to benefit some aspect of the community. Here's a example of a holiday that was introduced by another culture. Patriotic and state celebration is 4th of July. A celebration of natural beauty is Azalea Festival, and celebrations of products and resources are displayed and illustrated through the North Carolina State Fair event. Any questions about festivals and holidays? Can you think of a festival or holiday that was introduced to North Carolina that didn't originate here? Anisha or Sage?
Cinco de Mayo.
Very good. What national derivative is Cinco de Mayo?
Spanish.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's pretty obvious because the name of the holiday is in the language it represents. Okay. Now we'll talk about art traditions, and we got to understand that all of these aspects make up traditions. Arts and crafts. American Indians and our early settlers were the most famous for arts and crafts. They were very good with their hands. They were also known for their abilities to construct pottery. They are also good basket makers. They wove baskets out of reeds, grasses, or wood. Baskets were used to carry and store items just like you ladies would use pocketbooks. In the winter months, Indians realized they needed some kind of accessory to maintain warmth and stable body heat, so they began to make quilts. Um, and understand that all of these crafts were made to use on the daily, so they weren't necessarily created to trade or to sell, although eventually they did open up trading and selling posts for other Native American tribes. But in the beginning, these were accessories that they used just to live on a daily basis. Glass making was also another prominent trade for the Native Americans. Again, once they realized that the need for it was so high, there was a high demand, they began to sell these items. Music and dance is important in any culture. More specifically, the English, Irish, Scottish, and African music traditions can be found in the Appalachians. Where is the Appalachians? Do you guys know? What region does that fall in?
Mountain.
Very good. It's in the mountain region. Can you think of a college or school that's up there in the Appalachians?
Appalachian.
Very good. Very good. Some of the instruments that are common in that area are banjos, guitar, fiddles, and dulcimers. So it seems like they're string instruments. That's what. How many of you listen to bluegrass music? Okay, that's where bluegrass music came from. So it was those cultural groups that migrated to the mountain region that introduced those traditions. They also introduced clogging, which is traditional folk dancing. If you've ever seen clogging, it almost looked like they're tap dancing, but they're not. So that's another tradition that they introduced. The shag was also a dance that grew out of dances that were popular in the early 1900s. So this is about 120 years ahead of where we are. But what I'm illustrating is how over time, when new cultures enter a certain area, the identity of that area changes according to the people who live there. Okay. In support of the arts, North Carolina opened up a museum of art in 1947, and in 1965, we opened up the largest school of the arts in the country, and it teaches middle school to college. Here's some more art traditions. In Charlotte, they have the Mint Museum, which is one of the oldest art museums in the state. The Symphony Orchestra is also hosted in a Charlotte auditorium. Outdoor dramas can be seen on Roanoke Island, which is called the Lost Colony. There are a lot of outdoor dramas. So as you can see, artistic expression is big in our state. And now here for our formative quiz, one question, if I could get you two to both respond to why are art traditions an important part of North Carolina's culture?
They help bring the cultures together, maybe?
Okay. What about, think about why we have art. Why does artists create pieces of art, works of art?
To represent who they are?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Any more observations?
Maybe to help them have a legacy?
Okay.
Awesome.
Okay. I love the expression piece. It really just expresses who they are and how they feel. So let's dive more into the regions and the cultures and how they relate to one another. Okay. We talked about the coastal plain. What do we know about the coastal plain? That's where our what?
Ocean.
Ocean. Okay. Those cities and counties around the water. What color were they on the map?
Blue.
They were blue. People here depend on the ocean. That's where you have a lot of seafood festivals, okay? You also probably have a lot of people who eat what?
Fish.
Seafood, fish, right. And of course, to this particular region, agriculture is very important. Growing and harvesting goods is how they make their money. They also have festivals called the Eating Peanut Festival and the Strawberry Festival, and even the Watermelon Festival that honor how important agriculture is to that part of the region, that portion of the state. The coastal plain also works to protect the environment of the region. So people over there are environmentalists. They care about natural resources in the physical environment. And they also hold groups of boats in water parades. And the Piedmont culture. Huh?
I've been to a powwow.
Oh, have you?
Yeah.
Okay. The Piedmont culture, which is where we live, this is where they call the crossroads of North Carolina because it has the state's largest cities and its most diverse ethnic groups. Here's some regions in this. Here's some festivals in this particular region: Fiesta de Pueblo, Greek Festival, and International Festival. The heritage of North Carolina is shown in many ways, and again, it highlights the Mecklenburg Declaration Day. And again, we'll explore that in depth in a later learning segment. And of course, they have a lot of reenactments, like the one in Fort Dobbs of state wars that had a great impact on North Carolina. Another key aspect of the Piedmont region is people actually travel to these cities in this region to watch the professional sports, whether it be basketball, football, baseball. It's the Piedmont region for North Carolina that has a lot of sport-like entertainment. And lastly, the mountain culture. The people of the mountains have a culture built on many years of traditions and customs. It's in the mountains is where your American Indians and your Europeans, because they live so far from other areas, they had to become self-sufficient. They had to make a lot of their own stuff. And that's why American Indians have learned to make things like baskets and quilts and glasses and things like that. These have been traditions that have gone on for years and years. And it's important that these traditions continue because the amount of money that the mountain cultures make off of these self-created goods generates more than $120 million to that region's economy. So the elimination of that portion of the economy will really damage that particular region. Some festivals that are famous in the mountain region are the Grandfather Mountain Highland Games. These games include archery, wrestling, tug of war, caber toss. As you can see, outdoor events are a key feature of this region. Some of the arts that are contributions of the Scottish are dancing, fiddling, the harp pipe playing, the drumming and singing. And as you can see here are illustrations of those games and what they look like. Okay, coastal plain culture is basically centered around water, aquatics. The Piedmont culture, that's where a lot of cultural and ethnic diversity is. And of course, people in the mountains are highlighted skiing. Okay. Since we have explored various aspects of the North Carolina Piedmont mountain and coastal plain regions, we've explored various customs, traditions, and cultural contributions that various cultures have introduced to these areas. We will then create a graphic organizer. Let me show you the graphic organizer. This organizer is something you'll do in pairs. You'll work together to complete the organizer. Basically, the organizer lists some of the cultural and ethnic groups that you'll learn about in these lessons. The organizer wants you to list in detail some languages that were introduced by each cultural group, different types of food, and different types of traditions and customs. So this will be something you'll complete in pairs at your seat. Upon the completion of this activity, we'll come together to share some ideas. So I'm going to give you a few minutes to just kind of jot down some cultural characteristics of Native Americans, Lutherans, Moravians, Africans, or Europeans, and understand that Europeans encompass the Scottish, several other cultural groups that we mentioned, and we call them Europeans collectively because of the continent that they all come from. So if you could just very quickly list some details about some languages, some types of food, and some festivals and traditions that were introduced by one or more of these groups. I'll give you about 2 or 3 minutes to jot some things down, and then we'll share our responses. Okay. Anybody ready to share? Okay, I'll give you a few more minutes. All right, anybody ready to share?
I can try.
Okay, all right. Which cultural group will you be describing?
I started with the Native Americans.
Okay.
I figured the language that they brought was coding, writing with symbols.
Okay.
I think they brought corn over to us as food.
Okay.
And then powwows for festivals.
Anisha?
Would they have brought deer meat
Who's
as a new food?
who's they?
The Native Americans.
I'm gonna encourage you to refer to your text.
Okay.
Mhm. A custom for Lutherans would be Lent.
Okay. Lent, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Any more? What about for the Europeans? What did the Scottish contribute? What do we see pictures of?
The Highland Games.
What else?
The archery.
What about the bagpipe?
The bagpipe.
So this just gets you started. You will use this throughout every learning segment when we discuss Lutherans, Moravians, and Africans, and of course, other groups of European in depth. So you need to bring this to Morrow and until I tell you otherwise. Your exit ticket will be an oral assignment. You're going to share with me one detail from the lesson that you didn't know before we started. Because remember, we had some background knowledge now from the third grade. But tell me something that you learned today that you didn't in the third grade about cultural contributions to the North Carolina regions, Piedmont, Mountain, and Coastal Plain. We'll start with you, Sage.
I didn't know that farmers started the state fairs for agricultural.
Ah, okay. What about you, Anisha?
Let me think. The Native Americans brought the powwows.
Okay. All right.
Do we put Afrikaans under Africans language?
Well, the text didn't specify that,
Okay.
so we don't want to put it yet. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for your participation. We're about to line up for lunch, so you can return to your seats. And again, hold on to this organizer because it's going to be useful in every segment from this point on until I tell you to do otherwise. Thank you for participating.